This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1120, Book of the Month Club, Batman and Son.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. This is episode 1120. It's a Book of the Month Club. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. I'm joined by my regular co-host for these things, Nathan Struck. He's only missed one Book of the Month Club so far, so otherwise he's been here at almost every episode, unlike that slacker Paul Scores, who will not listen to this show anyway. So this time we're taking a walk on the wild side, on the DC side. Usually we're kind of plumbing the depths of Marvel. We're slipping through Marvel Unlimited, enjoying all sorts of legacy stuff. But today we're doing something on the other side of the tracks. We're talking about DC. We're talking about a book from 2006. We're talking about Batman and Son. So this is some really interesting stuff that we're going to be talking about by Grant Morrison. This is Grant Morrison's beginning of his Batman run. He's joined by Andy Kubert. In our last episode, we talked about Adam Kubert and different things he'd done throughout the years. Now we're talking about his brother, so it's we're keeping it in the family, so to speak, in terms of our focuses. So before we really get into these issues, Nate, I got to ask: had you read these issues before, and what did you know of them before you read them?
It's a fun game that we play. Have you read them? And then usually we're like, no, and you're like, yay, I have. And I'm sharing them with the whole I love. No, you know what? When you said that it was 2006. I was surprised. I think I would have expected maybe a 2016 in there. And I think it might have something to do with the effect at our age of everything's 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like 9/11's 20 years ago, and like the Berlin Wall was 20 years ago, etc. So this is stuff I would have come across. I don't even remember if it was Wizard at the time. Was Wizard still going in 2006?
It was still,
some kind of
it was dying, but it was still going.
Yeah, I remember advertisements for this and people talking about it. So if it wasn't Wizard, it was, whatever, some early Marvel DC websites are like the 90s, but it still felt fairly early, those websites at the time. So I'm not quite sure how I remember the comics news I was digesting then, but I know about this storyline. I remember them talking about Damian being a jerk and people having strong opinions about that. And like, that's not how Robin's supposed to be. And I think he doesn't swear and that's inappropriate and stuff about like the violence level. So I do remember the chatter, and I remember content that's come out of this, HeroClix related and other kind of like games or like comic book related stuff. But yeah, I was surprised to hear the date when you told it to me, when you mentioned it. So haven't read it, and it's my first time, and I would be really interested to see what I would think. I would think differently of this comic had I read it in 2006. I don't think. I know that I was not charting Alan Moore and Grant Morrison as sigil magicians. I wasn't kind of trying to look and read their comics. It's sometimes they're very not hyperactive, hyper iconic, or where they're really just going hard on certain imagery, or they're playing with ideas, and it can be kind of really dopey at times almost, or really jarring. And of course, this comic starts extremely jarring for that. I think that reason. So I think if I had read it at the time, I would have been more interested in more cohesive storytelling, realistic storytelling, the kind of stuff that, it's kind of almost ironic. Like Alan Moore is this great thinker and writer and artist because he gives us Watchmen, right? He gives us comic books for adults. He turns things around. He deconstructs. He asks us questions about what it would be like in the real world for these characters to exist. And of course, it would be awful. And then there are people who, after Watchmen, kind of like, and he's talked about this in interviews, that Rorschach was never meant to be a hero. He was never meant to be an idol of comic book readers. It was a joke on the on people who take comics too seriously, and yet people have taken Rorschach too seriously, and they've kind of gone like, yeah, like this is my guy, and this is what comics should be, and they should be gritty. And he's like, no, it was like the Question gone mad. It's like if you were allowed to take the Question and lead him to his most extreme extent in the real world, it would be a horrible person. And so that grittiness is kind of what Image goes into later in the 90s, and it's all about these very cartoonish versions of like, you know, Ubermen and testosterone-fueled bullet pouch casings and you know, traps and lats upon biceps, and the entire time when Grant, who comes along a little bit later in terms of like their career, and Alan Moore, what they're trying to do a lot of ways in their comics is to take the things that comics can do, these gigantic ideas, sometimes overwrought or sometimes overly, zany and high octane, and kind of get us to, I think that's their goal, to get us to really challenge our own reality or our concepts around art or around good and bad and justice. And so I guess that's a long ramble of like, the 90s, I guess, ultimately got the wrong message from Watchmen. And these two writers, I think, you know, were playing in a more meaningful space. So if I were to read this in 2006, I would have almost had been like inculcated in that like 90s, early 2000s grit mania. You know, Infinity Crisis is a good example of that, where they just kind of push the violence and they push this kind of like, to a point that a lot of readers just kind of said, I don't like this anymore. That's where I was. I was like, oh, Daredevil's been rebooted. He's grittier than ever. And this is missing that, right? There's a lot of weirdness to it. There's a lot of, I think, very symbolic, larger kind of like mythos or messaging being suggested here that I would have not liked. I would have seen it as inconsistent and overly, disjointed. So I think I would have hated it then. I think I appreciate it more now. And I ironically think also maybe perhaps that Andy Kubert, who I love almost every other situation and is a perfect gritty kind of 90s artist, almost doesn't work here for me. So I hope we can chat more about that, of course. And I'm sorry for the long rant, but that was a bunch of ideas all just kind of all at once that I was thinking about.
I don't think I had read this storyline since it came out. And I remember not loving it. I think it was fine. I don't think I thought it was anything particularly remarkable at the time. I didn't love Damian. I mean, Damian's inclusion, see, now it seems like such an afterthought, like, because he's been around for almost 20 years. Like, we've just kind of taken for granted that Damian has become such an ingrained part of the Batman mythos. There's been animated DC movies about Damian. Like, he's Robin. Like, he's just around. And we're used to that. This was the beginning of that. So it's hard to kind of go back to a pre-Damian era is kind of almost jarring. I remember, as I was reading him, I'm like, I forgot he was kind of a jerk. But you're not really supposed to like him at the beginning. I mean, obviously they give him rough edges so that over time you can kind of sand those off and make him more likable. I don't think I would have not respected, that's the wrong word, but I don't know if I would have been okay with that at the beginning, or if I'm trying to remember how I would have felt about it before. One thing that really struck me, and I don't think I had ever clocked this, because again, I've only really read this, I think, when it first happened, is like in that first big splash where you have Batman carrying the Joker's body in that first issue, which is issue 655, just all the spray paint saying Zur-En-Arr, which means nothing at this time, but it will mean something with Morrison. And I was like, oh my God, he was thinking that far ahead. Like, he knew what he was doing. So it did make me... Okay, so the Batman of Zur-En-Arr is... Well, I almost don't want to spoil anything in case you decide that you want to read more.
Is there a hero click of... I think there's a very colorful costume of a Batman that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen that in hero books.
Yes, so, well, it's a thing. I won't spoil it in case you decide you want to read more Morrison's Batman and kind of keep going. But it is a big thing that happens later. So the fact that it was being seeded this early, just in terms of, stuff around, I was taken aback by it, but it did make me start to read this whole book differently, because I was trying to think of it as, what building blocks will Morrison use later that he seeds here? Which I don't think you're going to have the same context because you haven't read the other stuff. So that's going to be lost on you. But it was interesting for me to read it with that perspective. It's also interesting, his big, jump on Batman immediately throws Joker to the side. We're not going to talk about Joker.
Yeah.
This isn't about the Joker.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's so disjointed at the beginning because you're like, what is happening? Like, I'm used to getting into the middle of action, sure, but the degree to which we get into it is kind of crazy here. You have Gordon. You don't even realize it's Gordon until you see the word balloon saying it's the commissioner, right? Because you don't really know who this guy is. There's no real detail on his face until you are told who he is. You see it's Gordon, and then you have Joker with a Batman and it looks like Batman's dead. You're like, what is happening? It really is embracing the Silver Age kind of, or late Bronze kind of weirdness with the Joker copter and those kids dangling from it. Like, it's a bananas opening scene. And then, but it allows Grant to kind of throw something at you, let Andy do some cool stuff with art. There's that first shot of Batman jumping towards Joker, which is also a confusing image, right? Because you also have a shot coming up and it's from the other Batman. Like, it's a really weird kind of shot, but the Batman itself looks fantastic as he's jumping, right? And then you have this scene of him carrying the Joker away, and then you kind of get to quiet down the issue, and then you get to kind of slowly build up to something else. It's an interesting change of pace to go in so hard at the beginning. And it's not even like we were used to seeing in comics where you'll see something happen and then we'll flash back to how we got there. Grant's not interested in that. He just wants you to see the end of this story. You have to wonder who this other Batman is, but he's not really going to address it. He's going to move right on. So it is disjointed. It is a little bit alarming at first, but then you settle into the issue.
Which I guess works for a Joker scene, how disjointed it is, but so a lot, I just kind of like having to go back. Like, you don't, being an experienced reader, you don't often have to go back several pages to go like, what did I just see? So I think that like this is a really good example of comics doing things that comics do really well. Like, you're less maybe inclined to do that with a movie. You just kind of let it happen and hope that it'll tell you. And then, yeah, you're right that obviously Grant has great affinity for Silver Age comics in particular. I don't know if they've really done a lot with Golden, but there's lots of references or homages to Silver Age stuff. And so, to have a storyteller and, like Andy, who's seasoned and is quite good. There's only a few guffaws in this where I have a difficult time following what he's telling me with his pencils. But we're going to have a centennial kind of podcast that will either go up before or after this. I don't really know the order. But in that, we're going to, see some Silver Age stuff where they literally every panel, every chance they get, they're doing the old Stan Lee thing where they do not trust their artists. They're like, look, it's the polka dot man. And what he's doing right now is the thing that's being drawn. And so to have that first page of the commissioner falling with 3 panels kind of hidden behind this splash. And then, the commissioner's been poisoned by the Joker. Like, this is an opportunity to show, not tell. Typically, especially in more modern comics, you really want to hammer that home. And that's very Silver Agey, right? And then, the Joker copter. And then it's juxtaposed with, a bloodied crowbar, almost beaten to death Batman, which, again, is very Bronze Age. That's very much like Jason Todd. That's very much like, Batgirl, right? Like this brutal, violent, killing joke kind of Batman. And then he's explaining, you can see there's children there strapped to this Joker copter, but then he's going to add in a bit of edge and say, well, but they're actually disabled children, right? So it's almost so over the top mixed with this kind of cheerful, happy-go-lucky, very childish storytelling techniques. And you can't trust your eyes, right? Because there's a Batman who's pulling a gun, and Batman doesn't use guns. And there's that kind of hyper violence of the 90s mixed again with this this silly laughter, and even the Joker is surprised, right? This one shot of the Joker's eye, and the Joker's like, "Whoa! This is not part of the joke." And then the double Batman thing. I was like, wait a minute, the lower Batman is the coloration's different. So is the storytelling telling me that Batman shoots the Joker, then he's jumping up after the shot, right? They have the what's that convention called? Typically with Spider-Man, but lots of people do it, where there's the different frames of animation of the character leaping through the panel, and then the coloration of the recent one is more deep. What is that? Is there a term for that?
I think Ron had called it something, but now I can't recall what he called it because he does it a lot.
So whatever it is, that animation style storytelling, I'm like, is that what it is? And then he's shooting and then leaping because there's no second Batman. And then, they go, oh, well, the police go, well, the Joker's still alive. And then the Batman who is our Batman, the good Batman, just throws him in a garbage bin, which again is seems to be Grant going, hammering home what you're saying, which is, this is not about the Joker. He's gone, right? But that's not how our Batman should act. So I also had to go back, and I think the ideas again are more important to Grant here than making it cohesive. And maybe it's also the point, right, that you are supposed to feel like you're reeling in it. This is media. What is it called? In media res, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of the storytelling, in a way that has you whirling. And then, we get to the commissioner in the hospital, and the commissioner will give us a bunch of exposition that will help us. All the while, though, really hammering home this whole kind of thing that it fades quickly, but the absurdism of it, right? Everything is funny. This is funny. This is ridiculous. I'm reading a newspaper about someone dying, and there's a death toll, and people are being decapitated. That's funny. And I'm going to do jokes about it. The absurdity of life for comics, I guess, is really hammered home for this Joker section. And then, they just kind of leave it, and there's not really any more comedy after this. So it does different things. So it's really kind of all over the place.
I do find that I think part of the confusion too, and this is more on Andy, I guess, is that when you have that first splash of the Joker, over the broken Batman, and you see the details right on the mask, the cowl is broken, damaged. You don't see any of the kind of the white eye holes or anything. You just see the guy's eyes, right? And then when you have the shot in the next page where he picks up the gun and says "die," you can see some of the broken cowl, but it's not as broken as it was. It's it's inconsistent. Now he's got the white slits over the eyes. It doesn't even look like it's the same cowl as before at all, which I think, to me, when I first read it, that's why I was confused at first. I'm like, well, it doesn't even look like it's the same broken Batman we just saw in the first, on the page prior, but it is that Batman. And when you get to the next page, you can see him, your eyes don't even go to the fact that there's another Batman shooting Joker, right? You just see the Batman jumping above, but he's the broken Batman's on the ground. I just felt like that, you're right, that whole kind of sequencing was not as polished as I would have expected in the art, and as clear as I would have expected from the art. It does lack some of the consistency to draw your eyes through without having to go back and say, wait, what did I just see?
Well, yeah, and it's also the way that it is the same Batman, but it seems like two Batmans carrying the Joker's body down into the alley. Almost this kind of careful, ginger, respectful. He could have left him on the rooftop. He could have knocked him off the rooftop. But then, as he approaches the police or the ambulance, Batman, no, he's still alive, yells the police officer, and Batman, over his head, throws the Joker into a bin.
Yeah, I hate that.
While Commissioner Gordon's laughing. So, why why respectfully carry his body down only to just stand in front of the cops and go, chew? What? So I was like, wait, did one of the Batmans carry him down carefully out of respect, and then the officer Batman throw him into... was there a trade-off? And then I was looking no, his costumes got damaged. So again, this is not really about cohesiveness. I suspect it's actually the opposite. It is really about a lack of cohesiveness. It's about the chaos, and it's about the ideas that the writer's trying to express, rather than this being largely consistent from scene to scene, which, is, again, in 2006, this is not what a lot of the mainstream comics are what they're being. They're trying to remove the dross of the 90s from them, and that just focus on violence, and they're trying to focus more on storytelling and conversations, and this is not what we're expecting. And I'm still thinking about what to take from this, but I don't know. Yeah, it was definitely arresting to me. Definitely threw me for a loop.
It is. I will say, this issue in general does do a good job, I would say, of trying to set up what does Grant want to say about Batman, at least at the beginning, and the idea of kind of leaning back into, well, who is Bruce, right? And that often a lot of writers are less interested in Bruce, and so Grant is interested in kind of saying and it kind of reminds me of Batman Begins in Dark Knight, where they're Alfred's you have to also be Bruce. You also have to be able to sell this fiction, and so having this version of Alfred trying to kind of push Bruce to also remember that he has to be this guy. He has to be this person. He has to be out in the world. He has to flirt with people. He has to, sell the billionaire lifestyle so that people don't ask questions and try to, draw comparisons or realize that he's Batman. I did like that part. I did like that he was kind of leaning into trying to rebuild a semblance of who is Bruce when he's not Batman, and that he is not always Batman. I did appreciate that. It's funny because I think once they introduce Damian, we kind of move away from that, right? It's more about who is Batman as a mentor when he's his actual son, and that's really what Grant wants to do going forward. But for these first two issues, we got a lot more of Bruce the person, and not just in the cowl, which I did appreciate because I do think that is something that is often underserved. And again, as the beginning of a run, it's interesting to see what Grant thinks of Bruce and how Bruce even thinks of himself. And how, like, Alfred keeps talking about the growl, right? Like how much of his, he's so used to being Batman, he's just become consumed by it to a degree that he doesn't even know how to speak like a normal non-Batman person anymore, which I think is interesting, and even lectures Tim on the same idea, right? Like they both are becoming too much their personas and not enough the other, like a human. So I'd like those touches.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that because Grant also spends not a lot of time on it, right? Like the percentage of time that we see Bruce doing Bruce stuff is very small, and it's very much an act. Like, it's very much an act. Like Alfred's talking him through that scene at the party, and he's just kind of like really laying on thick the Playboy millionaire thing, and it's the jokes he's telling and the numbers he's trying to get from the ladies, and can I call you, and the so. I don't know how to feel about that. I think I feel differently than you. I think I'm fine with this idea of trying to explore things outside of the crime fighting Bruce or Batman, or whatever you want to call him. But I just don't think that party, this kind of like charity event that he has to go to in order to feel like he's a human is doing that, because he's not human. There's another mask. The stuff to me that I guess feels more who he really is the scene in the cave when Tim comes in. It kind of gives us a shot, a few blips of like, what is he doing during the day? He's sleeping at 3 p.m. He's working out at 5 p.m. He says that he works out for 3 hours every day. Well, I see you there, Bruce, at 5 p.m. and then it's dinner at 7. So I don't think you're working out unless he was working out before 5. And then he's in the cave tinkering, and then his father figure comes in, and they're having a chat, and the father figure is like giving him some advice, like, "Hey, I want you to like, I think you should date. I think you should maybe kind of like the growl seems to suggest to me that things, life is getting to you, crime fighting life. Even though you've won, even though like you've taken care of most of the supervillains, like you're still in that mode of like the growl. So maybe you want you to come out of it." Tim comes in, got a sandwich for Tim, right? So he's having a bite to eat, wants to check out the car. Hey, Dad, to his father figures, who was the father figures and the sons, and then chatting about like, it just feels like a family moment, right? Like, oh, feed the bats. Oh, you feed the bats? Yeah, we feed the bats. And like, we take care of them too. And like, okay, Tim's like, I'm going to go out for a ride. So his grandfather figure brings him a sandwich to like take with him. and there's that bonding seems like it's very clear, and trust, and which I guess is to be disrupted later, right? In the second issue, when Damian's come into the picture and he's like, I am the rightful son, and Tim is immediately like, before things really get underway, he's just like, what does this mean for me? Like, what does this mean for our relationship? I hate this. So that's the thing. That's the kind of real family life that I feel is disrupted when we get into the Damian of it all. But I don't know how to feel about the Bruce thing, and I still just don't think he's being himself in those scenes. I
agree with in the first issue, but so I liked, again, him trying to figure out how do I play this part, and then in the first issue, and then the second issue when you meet Jezebel Jet, you can feel the gears changing a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think
there's some chemistry there.
So I think in my head, I think of it as kind of a two-part. Like, I think of that scene as a holistic whole, and I think it works because of the two components. The first half, as you said, is more vapid. It's more shallow. It's him playing a part. And then he meets someone who activates something in him, and he's a little bit more interested, and he's playing less the part, and he's still playing a bit of a part. He's still playing a little, but he's starting to become a little bit more real. And so I liked that So I kind of equate them as being one big scene, but they are spread out in those two issues. So I think that's probably why it works for me, is because it's a juxtaposition of him just with people who don't matter. We don't get their names. They don't matter to us. They don't matter to the flow. And then we immediately meet this new person who is a love interest and who is more interesting. And I love the use of comic art. When you first meet her, when you have like a comic art panel behind her, like on the wall, but it's like it's very comic art. And I love that play. Like, I don't often see Andy doing stuff like that or trying, like, that's a nice little experimental kind of thing of, you see different panels as they walk through, and it's an interesting juxtaposition with what the action you're seeing, but I really like it, and it's trying something different, which I would say that Andy's a lot more conventional typically, so seeing him try something that's a little bit more pop arty, I wonder how much of that was in the script by Grant, or how much he actually developed on his own.
Yeah, I would. My assumption was it's very Grant heavy, but I'm very interested to know the answer from one of the creators. That I do really enjoy. What is this? This is the background, it's the setting, it's the becoming the onomatopoeia, becoming visual interest points, and then of course there's that line when the man-bats attack, and Batman says, and this is really like out of character for him. He has no real reason to say this. It's like he's almost breaking the fourth wall, aware that he is himself in art or in an art form. The narrative box says, if there's one thing I hate, it's art with no content, right? And then he's floating down or jumping down in front of a poster that says "A City That Never Sleeps," pointing out, drawing attention to itself that perhaps this is a piece of art that's trying to have content or has content. And so, this is all 656, and I feel like this is where I really start to get interested in maybe more of what ideas Grant is interested in getting at now about the dating life mixed with the Talia life, right? Like, the family from before is going to be confronted with a literal family. He has a blood family. Of course, that's shown at the end of the last issue in a big splash. And then the supervillain wife, or would-be wife, and mother of his child. And so the child, of course, is a supervillain child raised by supervillains. That's why I have no problem with Damian being awful or being a murderer, because he's literally just like, what if your son was a supervillain? And then he has this someone he seems genuinely interested in, who reminds me a lot of Starfire. The coloring, there's a lot of coding going on here for Jezebel Jet, which I think is an interesting choice. And they seem to be genuinely flirting, but again, he's making jokes about everyone should be given millions of dollars so they can all be millionaires. And she's like, oh, that's gauche. Of course, it's super silly. You could possibly think that, but you seem to be a man of depth, Bruce. And so, to have them playing with form, to have them including onomatopoeia as part of the art, and then Grant commenting that we need to make sure the art has meaning, but highlighting more goofiness. And this is a blending of Silver Age and Bronze Age. The Bronze Age thing is the ninja, right? It's the Daredevil ninja. Batman really becomes a ninja in that era. The Ninja Turtles and the violence that comes with katanas, but then the absolute mania of man bats that are ninja man bats. That he has to fight is also kind of is silly, right? It reminds me of Hickman. What did Hickman do? Was it apes with PhDs? I think in the early days of Krakoa.
I think so.
Right, that's the fun of DC of it all, and the silliness. That's the polka dot man. It's super silly, and so this whole issue, countdowns from 6 man bats to 1. I'm still kind of just thinking about what's being said here, but this whole series definitely seems to be about, here are 2 ideas. Here are 2 things that are either opposites, but they're kind of connected. Here are the 2 families. Here's the 2 Bruces. Here's the Silver Age, Bronze Age. And just kind of here's art that means nothing, and here's art that I think means something. And you're kind of just left to pick at it. So this is the stuff that makes me want to buy the Morrison run and just have it and then read it more than once. I really feel like their stuff needs more than one read.
I do think one thing that always bugs me, not because of anything about the story, but it feels like you're hanging a hat on a hat when it's not enough to have Man-Bats. Now they have to be like Ninja Man-Bats. And like, it does feel like to me, it takes something special away from the original Man-Bat if there's just other Man-Bats. Like, and they're better Man-Bats because they're more trained Man-Bats than the original Man-Bats. Like, they're not. So that part of thing, that I don't love that as a concept when you kind of invalidate one character and give their stuff away to someone else. I mean, it reminds me, I don't think they were ever better than the Vulture, but you had the Vulturians, where it was like, well, what if instead of having an old guy with Vulture, gear, you have 5 young guys with Vulture gear? Like, it just, I don't love, I'd rather have an original character of some sort. I don't need that kind of you're diluting a character concept like that, and it feels like it invalidates or devalues the original character, in this case, the original Man-Bat, which is funny that we were reading this, and then we read his first appearance for our next episode, which is cool and interesting. I didn't mean to give you 2 Kurt Langstrom issues right back-to-back to read about, which that'll be on our next conversation. I'll probably ask you more about it when we're talking about his first appearance. But, yeah, like, I felt like the villains here, I guess you kind of just needed something mindless for Batman to fight that wasn't a villain, right? Because the real villain is Talia, kind of, but even then it's kind of played loose. One thing I did forget was how long it took for Damian to even show up. Like, it's 4-issue arc, and he only shows up at the end of the second issue, and so you don't even get this. Well, I guess he's in shadow at the end of the first one. So the meat of it, the part you really want to read, which is how does Bruce contend with his actual biological son, you only even get that in the third issue of this 4-issue arc. So it feels very truncated, and even then, I felt like, did I miss something? Because you have one issue end with, like, Damian's got him at sword point, like, I guess you're my father. And then the next issue, they're in the cave. And you're like, I missed something big. Like, it just felt like there was something to be mined there from their first interaction, or to actually see him being entrusted with the care of this kid, which technically that the issue before did not lead off in that direction. And suddenly he's just taking him home to the cave to kind of show him his own life. Like, I felt like I missed something, and not in a way that I felt was narratively comfortable. I feel like there was something I missed that would have been quite fruitful, could have been really interesting to see, and we didn't get that, and instead we just kind of jump right into Damian in the cave, which I guess is just what Grant wanted to do. He wanted to kind of immediately put him in that environment and see how violent he can be and how different he is, how much he doesn't like Tim Drake, how much he wants to be able to put on the costume, he wants to go out and help his dad. Like, I want to see more of this, and I just felt like we lost out in some of that first interactions between them.
Yeah, which makes me think that, Grant's not really interested in telling what we would maybe consider a cohesive narrative, right? The character moments exist, but they flit around, right? If you can forgive me, like a flock of bats, because you get these family moments. It really seems like that Morrison is interested in these family moments of, like, I want to get to the Damian versus Tim. I want to get to really, issue 3 of this run is kind of where it feels like a lot of the meat is. And yet, like you're saying, Morrison also takes their time in the second issue getting there, because there's a lot of Man-Bats, and there's more Man-Bats than there needs to be. There's quite literally more Man-Bats than there needs to be. And then the action, the climactic action ends with Bruce falling out of a flock of them, and apparently his plan D is to knock himself out against this exhibit of a monster in formaldehyde, so he can wake up captured, because he's like, I couldn't really tell what's happening there. This is one of those moments with Andy, I don't know what's going on. Because he'll know he'll be captured and won't be killed, and he can be taken back to their hideout. And I'm like, there's got to be an easier way to do that. To have that jump to where Morrison wants him to be is a bit, kind of abrasive or shocking, but it's fun to have Damian in the Batcave. I will say Andy does struggle, and kind of maybe always has, to draw youthful faces, the faces of babies, the faces of children. I think he does a pretty good job with the X-Babies most of the time, but like Damian here often just looks like a man face on a kind of a small little stick body. But I guess when you have like the large frame of Bruce behind him, it's nice when there's that zoom out and you see the father and the son. So I did enjoy this issue. I think the art's really good. I love that Andy gets to draw this like giant, I guess it's double page spread of the Batcave with, again, the goofiness of like the giant Joker card and the T-Rex that has to be there and the coin. And then you can't tell me what to do, and I'm going to assert my dominance and stuff like that, and a little fight. Like that's all fine and good, and I really like the Tim of it all. And what is this? These, I guess we're both brothers or something. And Damian sees this immediately from his Assassin's Guild or his League of Assassins lens as this is a threat to my dominance or my hierarchy, my position in this organization. So he's already kind of obviously, he's been raised by Talia, right? He can be or is aware, that comes to light, that he's aware that she has a plan. He's aware that there's something else going on here. Things are not as they appear to be. But yeah, I think that having that moment where Bruce had a conversation with her about it, or was told, you're going to take this boy and I'm going to leave until you can stop me, is almost better to be missing, because I don't know how you would possibly render that conversation where it would be believable. She's like, here's this boy, he belongs to you, you haven't taken his DNA to test it yourself, you can do that back at your cave. Apparently never does. I'm leaving now to do supervillain things, and you can stop me if you want, or you don't, but I know you will because you want to, and also I want you there so I can try to seduce you into being my bad husband. Morrison just doesn't seem interested in those particulars. It seems to just be about these kind of colliding energies, father and son, over and over again. So I think that's what's going on with this issue. It's just a lot of father-son kind of and grandfather-grandson stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, short answer is yes. I mean, it's interesting to see what the nascent version of Damian was like. And as you said, it makes sense that he's this guy. Obviously, fans of Robin as a title and concept wouldn't have loved this at the time because they loved him at this point. They loved, they loved the Bat family that they had already. And suddenly you have a jerky new member. Now, eventually, over time, I would say Morrison never really was that interested in making him softer. It was other writers who did. And I would say other writers made Damian himself more compelling and more interesting to read and more someone you wanted to root for, as opposed to the way that more often than not Morrison ended up writing him. But yeah, I mean, the third and fourth issues, I would say the third issue is obviously more of the strife between family members, which is interesting. The fourth issue has a lot less of that, obviously, and it's just more on let's go fight Talia, for reasons. But even then, it's not necessarily, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. There's a lot of cool splash pages, though. There's the Bat Rocket, there's all sorts of kind of that kind of stuff. I would say the issue does end very abruptly. There's some great art on Batman's kind of flight suit, which reminded me of the suit he had in the Legacy, DC Legacy HeroClix version, which was based on a Jim Lee costume from Hush, but he's kind of wearing that type of costume again. We get more of the Man-Bats, or sort of more of the creatures, I should say. But it does feel like it just kind of ends abruptly with an explosive, charge, and it looks like, Damian and Talia are dead, but we know they're not. And it just kind of feels very perfunctory, I guess this story's over, which I thought was really abrupt. And then I looked and the next few issues aren't even by Morrison. There's someone else writes, Ostrander writes, I think 3 or 4 issues, and then Morrison comes back. So it's kind of a weird, disjointed kind of reading experience if you were reading it monthly as well. But it's interesting. I would say on the whole, I don't remember the Morrison run getting better. I remember it getting worse, or at least getting stuff I didn't enjoy. I should say it's not worse, it just wasn't necessarily to my taste. This was, overall, I would say, pretty clean storytelling for the most part. There's some weird stuff, as we kind of pointed out in the first issue. We do have some abrupt jumps, but for the most part, I understood what the story was. I didn't feel like I was lost. It did make me feel like it, again, had an abrupt ending, or that Grant didn't really have a solid ending per se, and just kind of went with something a little bit hokey. But that feels very kind of Silver Agey too, right? It's just kind of it's over, which does happen in a lot of the old Detective Comics stories. So yeah, overall I would say I enjoyed it. I think the art for the most part was good. I think the fourth issue felt like Andy was less detailed. It felt like it was a little looser, maybe just less time to be able to work on the project. It felt like there was larger panels, less individual panels, maybe for a time-saving kind of need as well. It did feel a little bit different than the first 3 issues. But overall, I'd say it was a solid start to a run by an author who, like it or not, had a very substantive run on this character. It added a huge piece of Bat mythos, which, how often can you say that, where a character shows up and actually becomes an enduring part of the legacy of the character? As I said, Damien's still active, and it's been 20 years just about. So, I mean, it was definitely successful in that it introduced a new character. It did make people go back and read, I think it's Son of the Demon, or one of those kind of, there's many demon titled kind of books that were technically out of continuity. This brought it very directly into continuity that it did happen, and that's where Damien comes from. So it kind of solidified one of those old stories that everyone kind of said, oh, well, it's not real continuity. Well, now it is, because with Grant, everything's in play, which I do respect and enjoy with them, that if anything has ever happened in a Batman comic, it's fair game. It happened.
That's fun.
And it's how, and then he gets to play with, they get to play with that. So I do like that Grant is one of those creators who's not afraid to just say, everything happened, so let's see how it happened. And I can use things that other people may have thrown away or like to pretend don't exist. I'm going to use the weirdest stuff and make it happen and make it real. So I do appreciate that from Grant, because I think a lot of writers just try to kind of sweep things under the rug if it's unsightly or weird, and Grant just leans into the weird.
Yeah, that's definitely Mark Millar will, very different writing style, but there's something about the UK sensibilities, right, of people who grew up, these kids who grew up getting comics, right, in the way that, in a different and yet similar way to us, right, newsstand or whatever they could find, and and Zeb, right, like, you can see their inspirations, wear them on their sleeves, right, when Zeb's writing Hellions, and he's like, well, I was reading comics in the 70s and 80s, and so, like, here we go, here's Orphan Maker and the Nanny. And so clearly that was an issue that Grant enjoyed and remembered and maybe thought about, and then just kind of went, yeah, whatever happened to that, and then gets an opportunity to do it. And why not, right? That embracing of comics continuity or history from the viewpoint of a reader who's very far afield from like the American ethos. So there's something there about this love of the the gaudy, of the wild and the weird. And this definitely starts off weirder than it ends. It ends in a way that it feels very much like Villain of the Week. Something's going to happen later about this, but there's a big explosion. You can't find anyone. But I'm interested in reading more. Usually you ask that question, and I think you may have been about to, but I would absolutely like to read some more of Morrison's work here on Batman and see what's going on with the reference at the beginning to that other Batman who, as I recall, has yellow and red or something on the costume. I don't know.
I mean, that would appear to be in your future. And you're right. That was my next question. Did this make you want to read more? So I guess the answer is a resounding yes. So I'll be excited to see where you go with your Batman journey.
Is Andy also along for the ride, or is Grant working?
He does at least one more arc, but I think that there's a lot of different artists he works with. I think Tony Daniel's one of them. I can't remember all, but I mean, he's on the book. He's on the character for a long time. Like it's Batman for a while. Then there's like Batman R.I.P. and then Dick Grayson's Batman, and it's Batman and Robin by Frank Quitely. So there's a lot, and he's writing that. Then it's Batman Incorporated. Like, I think, unfortunately, there's so many different books around that period, you would almost have to look at like a proper Grant Morrison Batman timeline to make sure that you kind of did it all in order, which is unfortunate. There's also some appearances in Final Crisis, which is, again, written by Grant Morrison. So there's a lot of stuff that weaves in and out, and if you're trying to track his version of the character. But it does create a more holistic whole if you do it.
Yeah, like I'm looking right now just to see what is available for me to buy, and it's like an omnibus exists, which I would imagine would have a collection of whatever, multiple different books that Batman is that Grant's writing for. But I would love if there was just like I don't know, an epic style series of books I could get. Anyway, I'll have to look into it later. But yeah, I got to figure this out. See what I can get.
I mean, you can just enjoy it digitally.
I suppose you're right. Even though that's really not my preferred way to enjoy it. You know me. I picked up the JLU. That's a cartoon. JLA Morrison stuff. Because of those new collections they've been releasing, and I've been really enjoying that format. I just wish everything would have that format. I want everything to be in epic format, and I can't get it, so I'm sad, and I guess I'll just go eat worms.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for joining me for Book of the Month Club. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Rate the show on Apple Podcasts. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts and listen to us on Spotify. Next episode will likely be another conversation with me and Nate as we talk about some centennial issues of a specific title. You'll be able to find out if you listen to that episode. Also upcoming, Chris Ryle has just done a book delving into Daredevil Born Again, so we'll be chatting about that book with him, and that'll be coming out in a couple weeks as well. On the docket, but not yet scheduled, we'll have future creator commentaries with Chuck Austin, Pat Olaf, and Ron Friends, so that'll be coming out sometime over the next 2 months, where we have 3 different episodes, one each with each of those gentlemen. So make sure you tune into those, keep subscribed, and thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.